Welcome back, guys, to another episode of Trades Talk. We are so excited to bring on today's guest, Tom Howard, who is the man of many titles. The most closest one to me is the Vice President of Customer Experience for ServiceTitan, but also owner, CEO, business partner of many different companies within the trades and outside the trades. And we are so excited to have him on today. So, Justin, what were your thoughts on our conversation with Tom?
I mean, strap in. This episode is high energy. Tom drops so much information. He gives us his insight on incentive-based pay, rapidly growing his company from 15 to now well over 60 million in just the last few years. And that's just one of his companies. It's funny how he reflects back on his company when they were a million, and he knows every year what they were doing. But now today he's like, I don't know, we're like 30, 40 million at this company and 30, 40 at this company. But his perspective on the trades industry is so vast. He owns a company in Australia along with other states. So this episode is one of those that you're going to want to star and come back to. I know I will be.
Yeah, I've already told some people that they're going to have to download it. I'll let them know when it comes out. I think it's important to talk about Tom as a business owner for the trades, but just Tom is a leader, all around leader. He has extensive leadership skills. He's constantly learning, he's constantly growing, and gives some great recommendations on ways that you can help grow yourself as a leader, as a coach, and as a business as a whole.
Yeah. Yeah. Whether you're a business owner or you work in a business and you're looking to take your career to the next level, this is going to bring a bunch of insight and probably more than anything, just excitement and motivation. So I say we should jump on with Tom. Let's get this going.
I'm all for that. Let's get going.
All righty. All right, guys, we're here with Tom Howard today. Another episode of Trades Talk kicking off. Tom, how are you doing today?
Doing pretty well. How are you guys?
Doing well. Thanks for joining us.
Doing great. Waiting for Maggie to respond. Maggie,
I was still deciding if I was doing well today or if I was on the fritz. So, St. Patrick's Day was yesterday, recording the day after St. Patrick's Day. And, it's always a rough Monday coming in the office after that green beer. So
Tom, want to jump right into things. Why don't you give us just a quick little background of your story and kind of how you got here today?
Sure. I started out in the industry when I was like 15 years old, sweeping floors and cleaning trucks for a guy that lived like a mile down the street, and ended up going to working in the trades through college and things like that. And after I graduated college, I had a degree in finance. So I went into finance and I hated it. And then I tried working at a law firm because I thought I might go to law school, and I hated that even worse. And ended up back in the trades. Just funny thing is, I always thought I'd be working in the trades just to get through college. Yeah. And I thought about it when I finally finished college. I had 9 years experience in the trades and a business degree. And for some reason, I thought I was going to be working in finance or law or something. I don't know like why that worked out. But anyway, I bought my first company when I was 27 or 28, somewhere in there. Okay. And depending on when the thing closed, I don't know. And it was a small company, about 11 employees. And I was very fortunate because the owner carried the note. And so I just had to make payments to him. He was a pretty cool guy. I'd worked with him for a few years and he was looking to get out.
What kind of business was that?
Air conditioning. Okay. I mean, it was air conditioning, plumbing, and solar at the time, but the only thing making any money was air conditioning. So we got it down smaller. And they did electrical too, like a lot of things. Now we've grown it since then. So now it does air conditioning and plumbing again. We don't do solar. We don't do electrical. We just started a roofing division. So we'll be doing that. And yeah, it was 1.6 million in revenue roughly at the time. And yeah, now it's, I don't know, that area. I mean, that city and that town, because we have other locations now, but that town will do 54 million in revenue this year. And then it has 2 other locations that'll do another combined like 13. So that should get us up to about 67 at that company.
What was that company doing, let's just say 5 years ago, just to give us some idea of this timeline?
Let's see, longer story. ServiceTitan asked me to join their company and basically represent the voice of the contractor inside ServiceTitan in early 2020. Well, they came to me in late 2019. So that was about 4 years ago. And when I went to ServiceTitan, I know that we were doing 15 million in revenue. So about, yeah. And now we'll do about 67. And that doesn't count. I acquired a couple other companies I'm a partner in one in LA or Beverly Hills that now has LA, Beverly Hills, and San Diego. That one will do, it's above 30 million combined through those three. And then I got a company in Australia that I partner with Tommy Mellow on, and a guy from Australia. And so the three of us are down there, and that one will do at least 30 million in revenue this year. So it's hard. When I start adding it up, it's difficult because, it's not like I can go buy one share of Pepsi stock and say, well, I have $1 billion company now. So people say, well, how much revenue do you do? I'm like, well, if you own 20% of a company, does that count? Like, can you count all that revenue for you?
Yeah.
I don't know. The only one I really own all of is almost all of it. I gave some to the employees, but I own way more than 50%, more than 70% is Lee's. It was called Lee's Acutech Service, but now it's Lee's there.
And so Lee's is the company that you took from that 15 million in 2020 to now sounds like well over 60 million today. And that's why we wanted to really have you on too, is this rapid growth over the last 4 years. I'm sure you've learned a ton and you've probably made some mistakes along the way.
Yeah. I think the most growth, honestly, of me personally came at the 1.6 to 1.8 million to $2 million range. Honestly.
Wow.
I look back at that and think like, that's where you're learning the fundamentals.
Yeah.
Right. And whenever your company grows, you got to learn to grow with it. And I think what people don't understand is, and by the way, that was, to give you a timeline, that was 2011 when I was at the $1.8 million range. And I had a couple of years. There was 1.66 to 1.82. The next year was 1.85. The next year was 2.7. The next year was 3 million and 5,000. My goal was that year was 3 million. By the way, when you're a business owner, like you remember these numbers for years.
Yes.
And then it went from 3 to 5, 5 to 9.4. The next year, I think we did 11.2. Next year, 12.5. Anyway, and then we kind of climbed to that 15. And then after 15, we just really started blowing up.
Yeah.
So what would you say the one big change you made, or a couple of big changes you put into place to get over that $3 million hump? Because that's where I feel like you said it really exploded. Is it that you spent less time working in the business, more time on the business? What changed in you?
Yeah, I mean, at each one of these stages, at least for the air conditioning and plumbing side, and for every industry, it's different on the sizes because the average tickets are different sizes. But each industry has these walls that you got to hop over. And usually when you hit that wall, you start losing profitability, your growth slows down, you feel like you're a total failure and you'll never do well. Like everyone's got that like imposter syndrome going on if they have any conscience at all, at least if they recognize any of their mistakes. If they don't, it's even worse because now you're really going into a toilet and you're just not believing it's you at all and you won't fix your own problems. And I mean, I've been at that stage and in air conditioning at the time, and now inflation's been happening over the past 10 years, but there was really there's like $1 million wall, and that's where you like can't do everything yourself, right? Like, and then there's like this $3 million wall where now not only can you not do it yourself, you can't really oversee everything yourself either. So you got to get to the point where you can delegate some management, like to like a service manager or something like that. And even before 3 million, you got to be doing that. If not, like you're going to hit 3 million, you're just going to crumble. And then above that, somewhere between 5 and 10 million is probably time to get like another level of management, like a ops manager that, the service managers report up to or something like that. And honestly, at each of those times too, you've got to reevaluate your risk tolerance. At each one of those things, people start going, I should never spend more than $20,000 a month on marketing, or I should never spend more than $2,000 a month on marketing, or whatever it is. You got to just let that stuff get out of your head. I mean, if you go look at like Apple computers, are they overspending on marketing? Well, they seem like a pretty well-run business. And I can guarantee you the hundreds of millions of dollars they're spending on marketing is probably well spent. They have a lot of people analyzing that. Like, you've got to get that out of your mind. And the thing is, even with, I'm playing up a ServiceTitan now, people are like, oh my gosh, ServiceTitan is so expensive. Is it?
Mm-hmm.
Like, I spent $10,000 last month on ServiceTitan, whatever, $1,000, for the smaller companies, 5,000, whatever it is. I don't care what the number is. I'm like, well, how much did you spend on trucks? You've got 10 trucks. They're 70 grand a piece all in with your shelves. That's $700,000. Well, yeah, but I need the trucks to operate my business. You do. And you need good software. Stop thinking like, the thing is, these younger guys and younger gals are coming in and just totally disrupting the industry because they don't have the preconceived ideas that Slightly like I'm an elder millennial. I'm right on the line. I was born in 1983, right? My generation behind is like, we remember Windows 95 and Windows 98 where you get a disk and you put it in there and like you buy the software once and a software should cost $200. We have that preconceived idea. That is a self-limiting belief because that software can't do 1/1000th of what the new software can do. And you're still thinking I should pay $200 flat for software or $1,000 a year or something. Like, okay, fine, but you're going to run a business that used to run like they did in 1995, 1998. Have fun with that. Let me know how it works out for you here in 2024. And it's not going to go well. So I think when you're going through those humps, you've got to start looking at things. You got to put your big boy pants, your big girl pants on and say, look, like, I've got to start looking at like, if I want to run $100 million business, what does this look like? And I've got to sit down and I got to build a budget and say, okay, this is how much I should expect to spend. And if I spend these things, this is the net income that I should expect to get out at the bottom. And I can guarantee you, if you do that, you start seeing realistic numbers and you quit getting the mental block of like, I'm not paying 10 grand a month for software. I had Ishmael Valdez will tell the story from Next Gen Heating and Air. He was 30 million in revenue and losing money. And he was arguing with me saying, oh, you know, if I went on ServiceTitan, I'm $30 million in revenue, I'd have to pay $20,000 a month in software, $15,000 a month. I'll never pay that. Well, we implemented ServiceTitan and he paid it and he saved himself $270,000 a month in overhead.
Wow.
No joke.
Wow.
Yeah.
And I'm like, bro, you were literally worried about 15 grand. And all of a sudden, so now he starts making money. And a few years later, he sold for well over $100 million.
He would have never got that multiple without technology and a good profit.
Well, he was not making money.
Yeah.
And all of a sudden, he's up over 100 million in revenue. It's like, dude, I mean, he's over 100 million in revenue now. This is a few years later. Now, he's owned by, Next Gen's owned by Wrench Group now, and he still has shares. But like, that's the thing is like, you've got to get rid of that self-limiting stuff. So the walls are typically like, your management structures, organizational structures are going to hurt you. And they're what put those walls in place. Once you get above like 20 million, what I realized is at 20 million, as long as you have some oversight, some executive structure that oversees that, you're kind of building a bunch of $20 million pods. Unless you go into like really big markets like LA, San Francisco, New York, something like that. Dallas is a big one, by the way. You can do like $100 million pod, right? But they really become, you know, you get these $20 million pods or $30 million pods. So if you can build one, you could build 10 of them. And that's how really I noticed like it started scaling fast because I'm like, oh, okay, we can do this again. So
yeah.
I couldn't resonate with the whole buying equipment versus buying software more. I literally go to these trade shows and I see that all the fancy equipment on the trade show floors, everyone gravitates to buy the equipment, especially that boomer generation, the generation that is phasing out. I'm going to go touch and feel it. And, you know, I actually tangibly show something for what I'm spending my money on. And it's the exact opposite. The software runs your business. Trucks don't run your business. And if you, and to Ishmael's example that you talked about, he probably didn't know what costs he could adjust and he couldn't adjust before he had software to make sure he made money.
Yeah. And that was the thing. Like most of that 200K plus, like 270K, like 70K of it was office staff and stuff that we streamlined and, you know, eliminated in some cases because he didn't need all the dispatchers and all the CSRs that he had before. It was just a bunch of redundant work and a lot of paper that he was doing. He was actually on ServiceTitan doing paper and having them manually enter it in. But the rest of it was marketing. All of a sudden, he's tracking all of his marketing and knows what he has to spend money on, what he doesn't. And he cut his marketing expense so big because he's like, I don't need this, I don't need that. I mean, we're talking $100,000 cut, just boom, a month.
Wow.
For one swipe was like, I don't need that. It's not producing any revenue. But he didn't know that before. So it was just like, we're going to do this and this. And all of a sudden his company just starts making money and, you know, he sells and the guy is doing pretty well for himself now. But the thing is, yeah, the older generation, it's like, oh, look at my truck. Like I can feel it. I can touch it. Should be expensive. And with software, they don't see that way. And the thing is the younger generation that doesn't have that mentality of like, trucks should be expensive and software shouldn't, they're killing it. And people ask me like, how can you spend so much money on software? I'm like, guys, like I live in Las Vegas. I don't even live where any of my shops are. I sold my company in Las Vegas. Like I've got 6 shops in California. I'm operating them remotely. And I checked in February at a 66% growth rate.
That's huge.
Yeah.
Like month of February over last February. It's like, guys, I can't do that without software. You want to sit here and argue with me about, I'd pay $100,000 a month for software. I don't care. Whatever it takes to get to my end goal. If I'm going to make $10 million in profit for the year, what do I care? Like, I'll pay for any software, whatever comes down the line that I need. So any tool, what hydrojetters, whatever. It's $50,000 for a hydrojetter. I'll take it. Like,
I think, well, you mentioned risk tolerance earlier, and the ability to have a high risk tolerance and to go and make those bets, place those bets on software and equipment, and then have that come through. I think that's what holds back so many people from growth. They hit that wall, they get that cash flow dries up, and they have to invest a little bit, and then they kind of either revert back or they slash costs in the wrong areas.
Yeah.
And for us, when we brought on Aspire in 2021, it was late 2020, we made the decision to sign with Aspire. And if you go back to that time, it was a time when decisions were really hard to make because we had no idea what was going on with COVID and everything else. And we were in California, so the shutdowns were affecting us. And I knew, though, that if we made the decision to go with the software, that there was more room to improve. And for us, it wasn't so much an overhead, although we did save some money, it was gross margin. We thought we were making good gross margin. We thought we were making profitable dollars in the maintenance realm and everything else. Once we got Aspire and started separating everything by service and started tracking all of our gross margin by hours, and our guys were actually clocking into tickets, we realized we were losing money in about 60% of our business. Another 40% was making a lot of money, actually, so much that it kind of clouded our judgment on this other side.
Yeah.
Did I break up for a quick second? Anyway, the Aspire software system was able to identify these areas that we needed to increase pricing. And we did that. We increased our efficiencies in the field while increasing pricing. And we went from like 42% gross margin in 2020 to 52% gross margin in 2023. So in 3 years, we bumped up 10%. And on a $20 million company, right? I mean, you can do the math. That's an extra $2 million coming into the bank account every year.
Yeah. Cash. Bottom line.
Yeah. Which allows us, and this is a perfect segue, Tom, into the next question for you, but it allowed us to pay our employees better. And once they started getting paid better, they started reacting better in the field. And boom, it was a cycle of positivity.
Yeah.
You are, I know, a big proponent of incentive-based pay and helping your techs make more money. Can you walk us through a little bit of kind of how you utilize ServiceTitan and other software to do that?
Yeah, well, I can do with or without the software. I mean, ServiceTitan makes it a little bit more streamlined and easier to do, but I saw the impact when I was at my company in Vegas. Now, we had my partner was an incredible salesperson. We had a great GM. We had a great team. And so it's not to take anything away from them, but California has a bunch of laws that make incentive-based pay really tough. And we've gotten through them, and we make the incentive-based pay as good as we can with what we have, and it really helps. But when I saw in Vegas, we could go to almost straight commission for almost everything, and it was legal, and I was like, okay. And all of a sudden I started seeing their installs in Vegas took half the time my installs did in California. Same exact installs. And I was like, but the guys in Vegas were being paid by the install, and the guys in California were paid by the hour. And there's a great book. It's called The Sin of Wages. And it says, when you pay people for their time, you get their time. When you pay for them for performance, you get performance. Like, you get what you pay for.
Makes total sense.
If you want to pay them for their time, they're going to put their time in. You'll get time on it. Mm-hmm. If you want performance, pay them for performance and you'll get performance. It's one of those things. So anyway, in Vegas, my average ticket was $3,000 less per HVAC install. And we were making more profit in Vegas than we were in California. And I was just shocked. And that's when I went to my team in California and said, look, no, get every HR attorney you can on the phone, get every lawyer you can, and let's figure out a way to get through this. And we did. And we still, a company our size, you would expect to get sued at least once a year from some wage dispute or something. And we haven't been sued. Well, we haven't lost a lawsuit a single time in California. And I've been in there for a dozen years. And we had one person threaten, and that was it. And they lost. And because we just told them, like, look, this is what's going to happen. our attorney sent in their paperwork and it was like, we're good. Bottom line is we just had to put our heads down and realize like the value of incentive-based pay is so high. I'm telling you this, it will do more to change your business than almost anything else you can do there. Your pay plans and pay structures, the way you incentivize your people matters a ton. And I do not want to hear, I've gone to a ton of businesses. Yeah, it does all work the same regardless of how I'm paid. That's not true. I'm the business owner. If someone was paying me hourly to run my business, I can guarantee you my business would not perform as high as like it does when I get paid based on the profit of the company. That's it. That's what makes capitalism so amazing. Like we will all be pushing. I've lived in post-communist countries. It's not fun. The mentality is totally different. And your employees' mentality, when you're paying them some hourly rate, which by the way, mirrors communism in many ways, because I can guarantee you, you can't tell who's doing better that well. And so you're like, oh, I give this guy 20 an hour. I give this guy 25 an hour. I give that guy 40 an hour, whatever. Guaranteed, you're not checking their performance every week and adjusting their pay.
No.
They're all getting paid and they're just doing their thing and going along. And if you look at what happens in communist countries, like look at and I try not to go into politics too much, but I think everyone agrees on this, just look like you have performance. Now, regardless of whether or not you like communism or not for other reasons, when it comes to money and profit, capitalistic countries progress more. That's it, period. People have an incentive to get up there and just make it happen. And so I try to mimic that as much as I can. I don't even like giving out, equal gifts to people at the end of the year. I don't. It's like, hey, if you're not performing, you shouldn't be getting something. And even your annual bonus and everything else, your monthly bonus, it shouldn't be the same. It should, and people should realize hey, when I'm at this company, if I work hard, I'm going to get paid more. And what I would say on incentive-based pay, the things that I could put in there and some of the meat and potatoes and mechanics of it. One, with your incentives, try to make sure that your incentives are tied to performance of that individual. So I get these things all the time. Oh, we're going to pay our service manager based on the net profit of the company for the month. It's or for the year, right? Service manager gets a bonus based on yearly net profit. First of all, service manager does not control your overhead at all. They don't control your rent, your phones, your anything. So they don't control the net profit. Now, they don't control everything inside gross profit either, but they control gross profit a lot because they control who works, what the labor cost is, that kind of stuff. If you delegated them and empower them properly, they do. Secondly, they control parts costs and other things. Put it in their hands. You guys go start being in the negotiations on the parts costs and things. Then, by the way, you've got to keep your callbacks down and your warranty calls down and that kind of stuff. So they're controlling their gross profit. They're not controlling net profit. So don't pay them based on net profit. Additionally, so pay them on gross profit. If you have an individual tech, you can pay them on their individual performance. That's fantastic. If the other thing is, I learned this when I owned the California Autism Center, which was these kids, when they were treating children with autism and they're teaching them things like how to make eye contact, how to spend time coloring, how to things that other kids would pick up more naturally. These kids with autism didn't pick up naturally. So what they would do is they take if the kid really liked jelly beans, they take jelly beans, they put them in their hand and they turn on a timer, say, you need to color this picture for 1 minute. And for a lot of those kids, that was very hard because their attention span was very short. And they'd sit there for 1 minute and they'd be looking at the timer ticking down. And as soon as the timer hit, it goes ding, they would hand them a jelly bean or 2 jelly beans or whatever their deal was. And I said, okay. And then I asked them about that. And they said, look, there's 2 lessons you got to learn in it. One is that you've got to tie the reward very closely to the action. So if you say, and parents do this all the time, if you guys act really nice today, we'll get ice cream on the way home. You know what it's like for a 6-year-old to think 4 hours in advance?
Yeah.
It's not going to happen.
Or set their own narrative about what does really nice mean. You have to give them clear instruction.
Yeah, you have to. Yeah. So the next thing is you got to give them clear expectations, right? So one, you got to tie the reward directly to the action. Don't tell them you're going to get ice cream on the way home if you behave today. Kids cannot handle that. And the reality is adults don't either. If I said, I'll give you $100 to do 20 push-ups right now, and I give you $100 right now, you'd probably do it. If I say I'll give you $100 next year, if you do 20 push-ups right now, you're like, are you really though? And you start thinking about it. The further you separate the reward from the action, part it is. So when you say, I'm going to give you an annual bonus if you hit net profit, sure, maybe the GM, maybe your controller, maybe something like that, you want to have some annual bonus. If you can have a monthly or quarterly or whatever, or even weekly, it's great. Salespeople thrive on that. If I know that I'm going to go sell this job right now and I'll have commission tomorrow, Uber figured it out. Uber made a plan where if you drive your Uber car right now, you can sign up for this plan. Well, we'll deposit your bank account the next day. And you will work harder for the same amount of money just because it's closer to the action. So tie it as close to the action as possible. Next thing is set clear expectations. So when they set that timer, I know if I continue to work, then and that timer's going, I have to keep doing this. I keep coloring this until that timer's done. And then I know I get my jelly bean. So I have clear expectations of it. Like, don't tell them, hey, if you do well this month, you'll get a bonus. Well, what does well mean? What is it's totally arbitrary. And the last thing the other piece that I didn't mention, there's really three things to learn on that, is that they got to actually believe it's going to get paid. If you change your incentive plan every month, so no one really knows what they're actually going to get paid, and they don't trust that you're actually going to pay out what you said you were, then you lose all the incentives. So if I give them a jelly bean after the minute, half the time, or a third of the time, or whatever else, they're not going to work as hard on that thing because they're not even sure that they're actually going to get their reward at the end of it. So I started putting these things into place and these principles, and you can apply them different ways to different industries and other kinds of stuff. But those are the principles. Like, make sure they know they're actually going to get it. Make sure their expectations are clear. Make sure you tie the reward close to the action, right? Do those things, and you will start seeing massive gains. I was shocked at the amount of profitability that we had in Vegas. I was just blown away. And two things are great sales guy. We also had great incentive plans. And so I started implementing this. I didn't tell any of my staff that I learned it from the California Autism Center, but for treating children with autism, they don't want to hear that. But the reality is, we as humans, we all operate the same way. Like, I know if I go run, if someone said, I'll give you $10,000 right now if you go run 10 miles, like, I will run that 10 miles today. Like, I will figure it out. Like, I'm not in that great shape right now, but I'll figure it out. If you claim you're going to give me 10 grand a year from now if I run 10 miles today, no, I'm not. Like, come on. I'm not doing it. So
in Vegas, when you put this system in place, you guys were making more money, more profit. Your employees were taking home more money, and you were actually charging less per ticket than you were in California.
Yeah, that's the crazy part. My technicians, I have a former employee that lives 5 houses down from me in the same neighborhood. He lives in a over $2 million house, and he's a technician.
Wow,
that's huge.
Like, and by the way, his wife doesn't have like a huge roll-in job either. Like, he literally is a technician. We had, I think 2 people made over $1 million that year in performance pay, and that were field staff at that company. I mean, I was shocked. We had multiple $200,000 techs, $250,000, $300,000 techs. And that's the crazy part. Now, all of a sudden, what you mentioned, Justin, is earlier, you said, hey, once you can start paying your people more, then it really starts rolling, because now they're happier, they're performing better. And then, by the way, it's like my high school teacher, my high school air conditioning instructor said, he's like, if you want better employees, just pay them. Oh, my employees are terrible, they don't deserve it. Yeah, I know. But if you pay them more, you get to determine who you keep, because everyone wants to work for you. And so you keep the best ones, and you can decide to terminate the lower end ones. If you pay them less, the only thing that happens is the people that can't get a job somewhere else stick with you. And so you only get the bottom feeders. You don't get the top level staff. That's it. Simple as that.
By you innovating in California, and specifically in this, at Lee's, you've created something in your market that probably no one else can replicate, at least in an easy format, because you've taken the lessons learned from another business. Then you've hired your attorneys and everything to figure this out, which I'm in California too. It's really hard to figure out this incentive-based pay. Like, we're constantly jumping through hoops. But I have to imagine that it leads to this position where you are the premier employer of your market, and you literally get to pick and choose the A players, and the A players stay with you. Like, I got to imagine that's exactly the result of this process.
Yeah. And you know what the funny thing is? People talk about the issues with the pay and how hard it is. and their frustrations. And I tell people, I'm like, look, like I've seen a lot of different things, and you could hate the fact that the government could come out. They won't, but let's just say that the government came out and required every citizen to have a colonoscopy every year. Everyone would hate that. I think everyone would raise their hand and say, I don't want that to happen. Right. But if that happened, you know what the winners do? They open up proctology clinics. That's the reality. Like, we're going to win. I don't care. Just make the rules. Let me know what the rules are, and I want to win. And the thing is that when these heavy rules come out, it pushes everyone down that isn't a winner. And if you're a winner and you figure out how to get through it, that's when you make massive profits, because no one else can figure out how to do it. So you're the only guy in town that figured out how to get these incentive-based pays going. Guess what? Everyone wants to work for you, because everyone else wants to throw their hands up, be like, we can't do it. We can't do it. Like, California won't let us do it, blah, blah. New York. I mean, a lot of your states out there, you know, Washington State has issues with this too. Like, we can't do it in my state. Great. You say that. Meanwhile, I'm going to make my plan, and I'm going to make it legal, and I'm going to hire every single one of your employees, and I'm going to do it. Like, that's what I'm going to do. Yep. Like, it's as simple as that. Like, just take it as like huge opportunity when you have these big, nasty, ugly laws in your face. You have all the hard stuff. Like, you know, Tommy Mellow, by the way, Tommy Mellow sold his company, A1 Garage Door. He still owns 47%. When he sold his company, 25 of his employees became millionaires. 25 of his employees. It was amazing. Made a ton of money. And he came out and he said, look, like, everyone complains and says, look, oh my gosh, what happens if it rains? Like, if the economy goes down, if this happens, if so-and-so gets elected or whatever, I don't care what political persuasion you have, whatever. What if this happens, if that happens? They scream and yell and cry. And like, they're always complaining about, like, what if it rains, right? What if it rains? What if it rains? What if it rains? What if we have a bad year with this cloud? Tommy said, you know what I do? I'm going to dance in the rain. That's what I'm going to do.
Yeah.
And it's like, it's just the mentality of it. Like, all the winners, what's his name? Dave Geiger, same thing. I said, man, I'm really worried. Like, what if I don't want to invest in this next company or buy this company? Because what if a recession happens and comes? And he's like, what are you so worried about, man? He's like, I make the most money during the recessions. That's when everybody's going out of business. I can buy up these companies for super cheap. You know, I'm so excited for a recession to come. And to be clear, you know, Dave Geiger had Horizon at 4 million in revenue in the early 2000s, like 2004, 2003, something like that, 4 to 8 million. He said somewhere in there. They're going to do 750 million in revenue this year.
Wow.
Like, you know, and this is the guy that went right through 2008 dancing in the ring. Like, that's what you got to start thinking about. It's like, how am I going to get smarter? And so when everyone asks me, like, what would you do to grow your company real fast? And this is something you're going to talk about earlier, is like, I would tell them the number one thing you can do is you have to realize that your entire team will only run as fast as the lead dog, and you are the lead dog. So don't come in thinking that I was a great tech, so I should run a great company. You need to be running and being the lead dog, and you need to be one focusing on the things that matter when you get home. And it's not accounting, and it's not running that next job, and it's not, you know, doing whatever. What it is, spending that time learning to be a leader, reading every leadership book you can, applying those principles, reading all the finance books you can, reading the accounting books you can, reading all that stuff. And like, don't tell me like, oh, well, when I get home, I have to enter my invoices and everything else. Dude, you can outsource that for $300. First book you should read, 4 Hour Workweek by Tim Ferriss, and start learning how to outsource all of those things for like $6 an hour to the Philippines. Who cares? Move on, get to the next thing, and take your time and start learning as fast as you can so that you can be the lead dog, and you owe it to your team to be the fastest dog in the pack so they don't have to go to another company to do it. You owe it to your team to grow your business so they can grow in their company. You have a moral imperative to do that. Why? Because you left your previous company so you could go out and have personal growth. Now, if you don't make a place where your people can grow as well, then you're the biggest hypocrite I know.
Mm-hmm.
They need to have the opportunity to do the things that you did for the reasons that you went out on your own. And then if they still leave, fine. But at least they had that opportunity to grow with inside your company and keep growing and then stick around. If not, you're just holding them back. You're holding them back from their true potential because you want to have your company and you don't want to grow as hard and you don't want to work as hard as a leader. You don't want to focus.
Yeah, it's so true. It doesn't surprise me that you've had so much growth, because I'm thinking like labor is one of the most limiting factors that we hear about in the trades, and you figured out a way to beat the labor issue. And one thing that I'm going to say that you probably have heard time and time again is when you're paying these people incentive-based pay, how do you manage quality? How do you make sure that all of that goes in parity with getting jobs done quickly and doing more performance? How do you manage quality?
The thing is, with a properly set up incentive-based pay program, it pushes for stronger quality than you've ever seen in your company. The great one in Vegas was, hey, you did the job, you got paid your money for doing the install. Sorry, I got people doing, I don't have a door on my house. I got under construction right now and the door's not there and I got people pounding hammers. The thing is that if you can make your incentive-based pay program where it's like, hey, you did the install, and this is very difficult in California. Like there's ways to handle this, but you can't do it straightforward in California. But when you can say, hey, you got paid for the install, if there's a callback, you're going back for free.
Yep.
Guess what? Okay. Problem solved. All of a sudden, callbacks are lower, warranty calls are lower, like magically, because they're thinking in their head, if I screw this up and this breaks down on a Saturday morning at 9 a.m. and I get a phone call that says I have to run out there and I'm getting paid zero, right? California, you've got to set up hourly equivalents and that kind of thing. And there's a lot of stuff that has to happen to make it happen. But you got to look at like setting up your pay structure so that your incentives are lined up with their incentives. So if their incentive is to get things done with high quality, which is what you want too, then they're going to get them done with high quality. And the easy way to do that is like, hey, I'm paying you for the job. And if you get a callback that comes out of whatever, I mean, in California, you could do it. Hey, you have a bonus program, you get X amount of incentives, but for every time you get a callback, I'm charging you $50 and it's coming off. That's legal in California, right? Like, hey, as long as you have a signed agreement, I'm not giving paid legal advice. So don't take this legal advice, consult your attorney.
Right.
But the reality is like, there's a lot of ways to build it. Like you just got to get creative and you got to quit throwing your arms in the air and saying, oh my gosh, we can't do that in my state. Like you've got to have the mentality of I will win, period.
Exactly. The victim mindset, Maggie, I think that's a great, way to kind of just explain the way people are taking this challenge in California, and it's coming to other states. Like Texas is already starting to change a little bit, but Tom, what you said is you have to get out in front and you have to run faster than anyone else in your company. I can't agree with that more. And I always tell my leadership team that we're growing rapidly. And as we go from 20 to 50 million in the next 5 years or less, we have to personally develop faster than the company. Like you have to be at least a year, if not 2 years ahead of where your company's going to be. Otherwise, the company's going to swallow you up. And now to your point, you're actually doing a disservice to your employees because you got lazy and took, 3 trips to Mexico for 2 weeks because you thought you had a business that ran itself. And all of a sudden your business is outgrowing you and now you can't provide the leadership that your company needs. And this goes not just for the CEO, but it goes for a lot of leadership levels. Like my VPs in my company, I tell them constantly, like you guys have to set the pace. And if you set the pace that you're not following through and you're not you're not going to meetings on time and you're not getting your work done that you agree to get done, it's unfortunately just going to go through the entire organization like a domino effect. And you're going to have an entire team falling behind. So I can't agree with your leadership terminology and mindset any more than I do. I'd also recommend a book called Multipliers. It's a great book. It's all about, instead of just
writing that down.
Yeah, man, it is. So to be completely vulnerable here, like as I'm reading this book, I'm realizing I'm making a lot of these mistakes. I sometimes in meetings need to just tell my team the answer because I think I know it. So instead of letting them come to the answer as a team or letting, someone else figure it out, I jump in. And Multipliers is all about helping to make other people smarter that are in the room with you instead of always trying to make yourself look like you're the smartest person in the room. Like you want everyone walking out of the room feeling smarter than when they walked into the room. And that's a really hard thing to do. It takes a lot of vulnerability and humility as a leader. But if you're able to make your team feel like true geniuses, then they're going to go out, they're going to tackle the next big challenge. They're going to dance in the rain. They're going to be the winners. So that book is hitting pretty hard right now. And it's exactly what you were saying.
Liz Wiseman, Multipliers.
Yep. That's it. Liz Wiseman.
It's
Yeah,
funny, Justin, one of the first things that comes to mind when you talk about that, and Tom actually alluded to being a parent earlier, like in just parenting tips, is you gotta let your kids fall. Like I'm a mom of three, and one of the first things you gotta let your kids fail safely. Like if they're gonna do dangerous things safely, you gotta let them do it. If you can't answer, you gotta ask them a question, you gotta give them time to respond. And so I think a lot of lessons just in leadership in life you can learn from parenting as well.
celebrate mistakes. So when someone makes a mistake, we kind of celebrate and rally around that person, because you have to fail your way to success. I mean, it's the only way to do it in business.
Yeah. And the crazy thing is I'm amazed and shocked because each one of my companies, they have their own GM, right? And some GMs are better than other GMs. And you have to learn to be a great coach, which there's a great book, 11 Rings, about Phil Jackson. Whoever thought like Michael Jordan's the best player on the team and for the Bulls. And the reality is like no one really paid attention to the fact like Phil Jackson won those 6 rings with the Bulls, and then he turned around and went to the Lakers and then did it again. And it's like there's with different players, like, you know, with no more Michael Jordan. And it was really eye-opening to me. And the book is really great. But what I started realizing is like once you get to that point, you have these $20 million pods. Like you've got to really learn to be a better coach. And that's what like I've been trying to work on is like, okay, how do I coach and that kind of thing? And the stuff you're talking about, Justin, is like letting them make their decisions and not jumping in. And it's hard to step back and say, hey, you know, my sister is a great GM and she's only been in there for a few months and she's kicking butt right now and just crushing records at the company. And like, it's just apparent how good it's doing. And she calls me and gets asked for input probably daily, but she's not afraid to make her own decisions. And she knows that like, hey, it's your bonus at the end of the year. So if you make a poor decision, it's on you. I'm going to tell you what I would do, but it's not something you have to do. And then sometimes you just call in to bounce ideas off. Like, I think I should do this or that. And sometimes I think, man, that's crazy. And then she goes and does it anyway, and she blows me away. And if you stand in front of those employees and stop them from making a mistake, sometimes it wouldn't be a mistake in the first place. Sometimes their idea was better than your idea. You just got to let it happen.
Yep.
Let them develop into the leaders that they need to be. And like, they will surprise you. I mean, we're making more money than we ever made before, and I'm not in the company, for crying out loud. Like, I don't want to admit it, but it's like, hey, the Southern California company, Lawrence is a great GM. They do really well. Like, Lawrence calls me like 3 times a year. Hey, do you got to hook up on trucks? I need some extra trucks. I can't get trucks in time. Sure. Like, whatever. That's literally the level of phone calls we're having because he's an amazing operator and like just handles his business. Like, he just does it. He just works. And it's, if I want to get in there and start pushing things around and say, this is how we're going to do it, blah, blah, he just says, screw you. I'm going to go work somewhere else where I have autonomy and freedom and, you know, growth potential. So,
well, I think, yeah. And what you're saying, the motivation behind going in there and changing things up is usually because of ego. As far as I've seen from these bigger CEOs that are trying to manage different branches, is they want to go in, they want to have their fingerprint on the success, say, I did that, rather than letting the person in there just win, because they're doing it a little different than maybe you would have, but it's working. Right. And like, I think that's something I'm currently trying to work my way through as we grow the company, is letting go of like one of my VPs who runs our construction division. He has a different way of doing things than me. And I'm constantly trying to bring him back to my way of doing things. But I'm realizing more and more, it's okay if his way is different, as long as it's successful and it's in the best interest of the company and the employees, which I believe it is. So it's like this balance you're trying to go through this dance as a growing CEO and or owner investor, is you don't always have to have your fingerprint on the solutions of a problem.
Yeah. It's a generational thing too. It's a millennial thing. Like our parents' generation was never allowed to make the mistakes that we're allowing our employees to make today.
Yeah. I mean, there's a great book called Good to Great. And that one, it's very, very
love that.
That's a great book.
It talks about your levels of leaders, right? And what I think a lot of people get to is they get to that level 4. And in level 4, like, you're still taking credit for everything. And if you leave the company, it doesn't operate without you. And those level 5 leaders are constantly making sure everyone is succeeding and going and running it. And they talk about how Wells Fargo back at the time, like all of those people left Wells Fargo on our executive team and started their own banks and like how successful they all were. And it's like, well, you had this leader that was really pushing. Now, Wells Fargo led into other problems later on, which he writes a second book about that, about when that leadership changed. But like,
Yep.
that's what we should be doing. Is like, I want to have, and I talked to Vahe about it at ServiceTitan, and I said, what's your ultimate goal? He's like, well, have you heard of the PayPal Mafia? And I don't know if have you guys heard of the PayPal Mafia?
No, I haven't.
So
I have.
Elon Musk was at PayPal, right? And they had that whole group. Well, he had this group of people that all like were excellent operators, and that whole executive team, they now call them the PayPal Mafia, because they later went out and like all started successful businesses and everything else, like Peter Thiel and all those guys. And Elon didn't want to be part of it because he's like, they took a picture. If you look at the PayPal Mafia on Google, like it'll bring up a picture of all them sitting around, of like the group of them, like looking like gangsters. And Elon didn't want to be part of that image, right? But they made the PayPal Mafia because like all of them were really good and all of them were capable of like running stuff. And you know what Vahe says, like, I want a ServiceTitan Mafia. Like the fact that like, if we can make really good leaders that like really grow strong and hard and everything else and run well, they could run their own companies one day, do whatever they want to do one day. That's really cool. And while they're at the company, they're going to be much better and much faster growing, and, you know, and do things that no one else thought possible before. You know, ServiceTitan, you know, has 3,000 employees now, and a software company for the trades that investors never thought that we'd make any money in the trade, so they didn't want to invest back then. I mean, your biggest companies back then, back in 2010, are now 1/100th of the size. The biggest ones are 1/100th of the size of what ServiceTitan is now. Like, imagine looking at your biggest competitor and saying, I'm going to be 100x bigger than they are. Like, the thought of that is unreal. But if you have the right team, that's what starts to happen.
That's why private equity is exploding in the space too, in the trades. Everyone sees the money because service companies like ServiceTitan and Aspire, field routes have showed them the money, and there's money there, and they can see it now, and they want to buy it up.
It's interesting that you say that, and I have a weird view about this, and this isn't just a promotion of ServiceTitan. And Vahe asked me like why I came to ServiceTitan later. And to be clear, Vahe and Ara are the co-founders of ServiceTitan. Vahe is the president, Ara is the CEO. And I told him, I said, Vahe, I don't think you know, like, the way I look at it is like this. Back in the late 90s and early 2000s, you have a big roll up with Service Experts, Blue Dot, all that other stuff. Those companies went public and they failed. Then massive roll ups. And after that, no one was paying more than like 5 or 6 times profit for a company for years, 15 years, 10 years at least. And investors were shy about it. I was like, what was the difference between them and them? And people say, well, yeah, but they bought everything back then, blah, blah. I was like, yeah, but they're air conditioning companies. Like Service Experts was pretty strict on like air conditioning and plumbing and that kind of stuff. They wanted to do just residential, and they still had the same issue. Well, the reality is that in many cases, they were literally writing key performance indicators down on a piece of paper and faxing it to a central location. Can you imagine running 3,000, 4,000 technicians across the country and writing down key performance indicators and faxing them to a central location, trying to run a company like that? It's all delayed. It's not accurate, all that stuff. It's not just ServiceTitan that came about, but you had to have the hardware revolution had to happen. iPhones came out in 2007. iPads, it was like 2010, 2011. Better GPS systems that are more effective. All of a sudden, then you add software on top of that. ServiceTitan doesn't happen, by the way, without iPads or iPhones. Had that hardware not come out, that wouldn't have happened. You know, Aspire needed that infrastructure, the hardware that it's built on, to deliver the service that it does to its companies. You got the hardware, the software all changed. And all of a sudden now we're seeing that you can manage 2,000, 3,000, 4,000 people across the country. Before, the only thing you could do it is pest control. Trust me, I run a pest control company. I can train a guy in like a day. Don't spray your face. Don't swallow the chemical. Like, it's like not complicated, right? Like, it's super easy. When you're in the trades though, it gets more complicated, and trying to manage somebody and manage 2,000 people across the country and make sure they don't leave that gas line not quite all the way tight and blow up a house is difficult.
Yep.
But we have more and more control now, so we can do it. And now they've realized, like, investors are putting money, and they're like, wow, we are consistently getting returns over time, which means we can put more money in this industry. And now you see these 20 times EBITDA multiples that never happened before. Like, you know, I've seen multiple companies now sell for more than 20x. which is insane. They used to sell for 4 or 5, which means, and three was common back then.
Yeah.
And we're talking like 10 years ago too. It's not like 50 years ago. This is relatively
more
recent.
heating and air sold for 9 times EBITDA, and everyone freaked out. More heating and air was in Northern California, and everyone's like, oh my gosh. And then, Wrench Group went for a little bit more than that. Then Wrench Group sold again for even more than that. And then Gettle sold, and then A1 Garage. Now all of a sudden we're hitting 20 times EBITDA multiples, and everyone's like, their heads are exploding. Like, I can't believe this is happening. And we keep saying like, oh, it's going to stop anytime. Oh, interest rates went up. It's going to stop. And then it just popped back up again. And now I'm seeing 14, 15, 16, 17x multiples on like 10, 12, $14 million EBITDA companies. And I'm like, holy cow. And so what I look at is I told Vahe, like, look, Vahe, I can go around. I was a consultant. I was helping contractors across the country, one contractor at a time. I work for ServiceTitan. I can help 10,000 contractors at once. And by the way, there's thousands of contractors now that have become millionaires because they sold their businesses or did whatever, or they grew their company. It used to be you were a huge company if you're 20 million in revenue. Now you're mid-market. You're not even a giant. You're not even big. You're just mid-market, because now you can run a company that size and that scale with the right software and the right hardware in place. That's what makes an impact. And then when I see 25 employees at A1 Garage Door becoming a millionaire, I'm shocked. Like, that was life-changing money for 25 people. And by the way, there were life-changing money for more people than that. They just weren't quite million. Could you imagine $300,000 for a dispatcher, maybe?
Yeah.
Like, what does that do to their family's trajectory? It's incredible.
Well, it's like bringing it full circle too. You go back to Vahe's story and starting ServiceTitan and the whole journey that he went through, watching his parents, and I went through a similar journey. And it's so amazing to see the outcome today was this vision that he had 20 years ago. And I think you mentioned just this push and this incredible, national level, 3,000 employees, but it's like, it didn't even be, it was a vision before it was a thing. And vision is such a key ingredient in all of what we're talking about. So if you want to go out and run, you want to go out and win, what's the vision? How big can you go? And Tom, I think you told me this, is like, don't dream too small, because look at what's happening around us. So don't let yourself think that, 10 million is the peak of your fulfillment. It may be so much more than that. And it may not even be financial. Who knows what it is, but what you're sharing is very powerful, because it all goes back to this vision that many people had coming out of the trades of like, there's got to be a better way to do this.
Yeah.
Well, this has been freaking awesome. High energy, a lot covered. And I got to ask real quick, we're going to ask you for a trade secret here in a second, but I wanted to, you mentioned a few books today, The 11 Rings, Good to Great, Scent of Wages was one too.
Sin of Wages.
Sin, S-I-N, Sin of Wages.
Yeah.
How many books do you read a year?
I have a minimum of 5 business books a year, but that's my minimum. Sometimes it's 20, sometimes 25. And I try to do as many as I can on paper version, because I retain a lot more. Yeah. But honestly, like now, in order to hit 20, 25 a year, I'm doing audiobook like crazy. And I think that's what has really made a giant. If you want to know the secret to me, is continually learning. And not just from us. Like, I go to Tommy's place at A1 Garage Door, and I'm like, wow, I don't own a garage door company, but I have tons and tons of stuff I can learn from him. And I mean, I've been working with him since he was 5 million in revenue, and now he's hundreds of millions. And it's like, just learn, whether it's in books, watching other contractors like that you look up to, like I do with Tommy. I look up to like Chris Hoffman and Chad Peterman. Those guys, like, they've got amazing $100 million plus businesses in my space. And just learning, reading as much as you can. A book is $20. The book that you mentioned is Multipliers. I just downloaded it for $19.99. It's like $20. And then you a lot of you drive to work every day and you spend half an hour, 45 minutes on your drive. Like, just listen. You could finish a book like every week if you have a 30-minute commute.
University on wheels.
Yeah.
Follow up to that. So what podcasts are in your ears when you're driving?
I don't have a ton of podcasts while I'm driving, but I just have a lot of books. Like, you know what the other thing is that I really loved? I really recommend this. There's a app called Masterclass.
Okay.
And I mean, it's listen to a podcast, but I listen to like Jocko Willink on his leadership thing. I mean, it's just like, wow, Jocko Willink's one of these great writers. They got Richard Branson doing stuff on there. Mark Cuban, I've been listening to his stuff on Masterclass, like $100 a year for the app, I think, or $200 a year or something like that. And you just like, you're getting classes from Mark Cuban, for crying out loud. Like, dude, how are you paying? It's $100. You know, I just paid for my employee to go to Harvard. I paid for an employee to go to Stanford. At my company, college is free. You get into my company, you're working there, college is free, right? And well, it's not free to me. It's free to you. As long as you get a C or better, we reimburse you for all the expenses, right? And I pay tens of thousands. For Stanford, it's like the one that's coming up is $80,000. I'm like, gosh dang it. I can download Masterclass for $100 and I get people, I can't believe that app's so expensive. Are you kidding me? I have no shares in Masterclass, but I highly recommend just pay for it, download it, listen to it. It's awesome.
Love that. That's a great secret. You got to keep learning. And it goes back to staying ahead of your company and being that leader out in front running. You got to stay ahead, and you have to do that by learning.
Go look at like $100 million. If you're a $1 million shop, $2 million shop, go look at a $100 million company and don't be like, okay, I got to do everything that they're doing right now, because you're not going to be able to. But think about like 5 years from now, I want to be in that spot, or 10 years from now, I want to be in that spot. Can I run a $100 million company? Am I equipped? And it's hard to look in the mirror and realize, no, I'm not. Okay, what do I got to do to get to that point where I could be that $100 million operator? Like Justin, you were saying, like, you always got to be a year ahead of whatever fast, however fast your company's growing. And I tell all my staff, if you're the CSR manager, think about what it's like to run a CSR division, a customer service rep division, for a $100 million shop. Are you good enough for that? She said, no. I said, well, I suggest you start working on it, because that's what we're going to be. And if you're not there, you're going to have to find another job within the company or somewhere else, because we're going to have somebody that can run a $100 million division.
Clear expectations. That's what it is. And if, shameless plug, if you guys are interested in checking out a big company, I'll be speaking at Southern Botanical with Aspire and Weathermatic and ServiceTitan, the whole partnership, April 25th. So if you're interested, reach out. But we're going to do a little vision masterclass that day and a tour of Southern Botanical down in Dallas. Like you said, Dallas, Texas. I mean, it's exploding down there. So it's a great place to come visit and just see the city. There's cranes everywhere.
Awesome. Well, thanks, Tom, so much for your time today. We really appreciate it. And I can't wait for this episode to come out. I think you are going to share a lot to our listeners.
Thank you so much. We'll see you, Maggie. See you, Justin.